Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome to Sofa Reviews. Today we conclude with part 3 of the trilogy, Dracula 3 Legacy.
This film, at least having the decency to remember the film it's a sequel to, we see Luke find Uffizi, the priest from the previous film, as he ushers in the credits.
After the credits, we're in Berlin, in the near future, or tomorrow as it's known.
We then see Luke getting chased and then caught by a couple of vampires.
I'm to bleed, piggy piggy.
Luckily, Uffizi shows up to save the day.
I'm a vampire, I don't have to duck.
So they capture the other vampire and decide to have a nice little chat on the train line.
I would do what he says, he's in one of his moods.
Tell me what I want to know.
Fuck you! Hey, this is hardly the time for negativity.
Unsurprisingly, she tells him all he wants to know, and now we're in Italy.
Uffizi has gone to see his secret vampire hunting priest advisor.
I'm calling you back. We can't afford to lose you. Decision is final.
But now they're worried about him, and even though Dracula's back in the world, they want him to stop.
We'll offer you any parish in the world.
And all the young boys you can rape.
This causes him to hand in his priest collar so he can continue the hunt for Dracula. And now we're in Romania, which is under NATO martial law, but also where Dracula should be.
We also get reminded that Luke is in love with Elizabeth and that he's trying to save her, the whiny.
Well, maybe I'm like the knight or whatever, rescuing the princess from the evil dude's castle. I mean, how could she not fall in love with someone like that, right?
It's explained that the country is in civil war, with the rebels clearly being opposed to vampires, but they don't explain this to anyone.
Most curious was their requirement that all current and prospective government officials make at least one public appearance in daylight. I asked Gabriel, the rebel leader, to explain this one particular demand.
We have good and valid reasons.
They go along only to get to a checkpoint where they're told the only way through is to talk to Captain Suicidal.
Mon capitaine!
I think you just got promoted.
That's rather cold.
Well, he's not a priest anymore. He doesn't have to pretend to care about people.
As they drive off, they have a discussion explaining that the whole Judas plot has pretty much been dropped.
The next morning, Luke spies some guys with guns taking hostages.
Because Luke has a conscience, he grabs a gun and goes to help them.
Unfortunately, Luke doesn't have a brain and he hasn't really thought of a plan.
Uffizi shows up to help though, and they end up in a Mexican standoff.
And it's here that Luke gets a taste of compromise.
Tell your friends to put down their guns.
They won't do that. Those people will shoot them.
Shit. Okay, you tell them that they can keep their guns, but they have to leave the truck.
Without a truck, they are going to be hunted down by these pigs.
I don't really see why that's my problem. Shit. Okay, they get to keep the guns and keep the truck, but they have to get rid of their ammo. Yeah, that's it. Tell them to dump their clips.
And here, freeing the prisoners, they decide to take one of their own.
It turns out these guys were taking people hostage to feed to the vampires, and the villagers they were taking hostage know where Dracula is.
You're right, Snap. This is a fortuitous happenstance.
And so they head off with their prisoner before their car is blown up by a missile launcher.
Because his hands are tied behind his back, he's able to recover much quicker because he landed on his face.
Anyway, they go to a damaged town and find it full of dead people. And the circus is in town too.
To celebrate this, they decide to have a bonfire with all the corpses.
A young boy shows up, but before they have time to deal with this, they notice a helicopter crashing above.
Uffizi goes after the helicopter and finds a reporter, while Luke goes after the boy.
That's not your mother! Get away from there!
And if Luke had acted quicker, he might have been able to save the kid before he was bitten.
Instead he delays, and now he gets to kill a kid. Yay!
Uffizi sends the reporter, Julia, and her cameraman to the nearby church. There they meet Luke, fresh from the child murder.
So of course, having just been in a helicopter crash and fearing for her life, Julia goes for a midnight stroll and meets Uffizi.
You shouldn't be here.
And you should.
After burying their helicopter pilot, they remember they're in danger and head back to the church.
The cameraman goes out looking for her, only to be picked off straight away.
Uffizi sends Julia and Luke back to the church, only for them to be attacked by a vampire clown.
Luckily, the vampire only actually wants to give Luke a hug, and so throws himself onto his stake.
Then Uffizi takes on his greatest challenge yet, a vampire on stilts.
Luckily, the vampire's stilts get caught in a grate and he ends up staking himself.
The cameraman returns to the church and Julia and Luke eventually let him in.
And it's a good thing they did, because he's a vampire now.
What is it?
I feel sick, but in a good way.
Julia accidentally pulls a bell rope, which seems to cause the vampires great pain.
And it seems that Luke has learned from the last film, as he knows if you want to hit your target, you have to insult it first.
Uffizi turns up at dawn with a jeep, and they send Julia off on her own to escape the country.
Oh, and it turns out she's in love with Uffizi now. I guess spending an entire night in a church with Luke and the corpse of your cameraman will do that to a girl.
They go searching for Dracula again, only to be stopped by a woman on the side of the road.
Luke tries to talk to her, but she just hands him her exploding baby instead.
Uffizi throws the baby away, and so, having failed to kill them, the rebels take them as hostages instead.
Anyone up for some croquet?
The rebels realise Uffizi is infected and decide to lock him up with Luke. Oh, and Julia's back.
Julia, what are you...
What, Luke? Why didn't I go to the London Bureau and file a report on vampires taking over the government of Romania? I almost feel safer here.
Spider vampire, spider vampire.
Even though the rebels know that vampires exist, they're useless at fighting them, so it's left to Uffizi to kill them all.
He does this in style and then gets to fight his vampiric infection.
Soon after, Luke spots the van that the bad guys were using earlier to kidnap people.
They go chasing after them, only to find a load of monks on spikes.
And it's this moment where Uffizi realises this mission to go and kill Dracula might actually be dangerous.
Whatever's beyond there, I won't be able to protect either of you.
They catch up with the bad guys just in time for Uffizi to get shot over a wall.
Luke and Julia get captured, with Luke being left in a courtyard with all the villagers that he saved earlier.
Maybe he'll save them again.
No, he abandons them to their fate while he goes for a little chat with Dracula.
We meet a rather talkative Dracula, this time played by Rutger Hauer for some reason.
I really think someone should have told him he's got dry porridge on his face.
Luke demands to see Elizabeth, and as such is shown a room full of vampires feeding on each other.
Which is, of course, the perfect opportunity to put nudity in your film.
We then get to see that Uffizi is still alive, and after the mild inconvenience of being shot in the chest, he finds a horse.
Luke finds Elizabeth and he tells her that he loves her. So she throws him into a wall.
Julia wakes up to find herself in Dracula's lair, just in time to see Uffizi's rampage.
However, by the time he gets there, he finds Julia has been wounded.
So they start talking about how Dracula needs to be forgiven, even though in the first bit, oh, sod it, they fight!
Dracula gets the upper hand and is about to kill Uffizi when Elizabeth stabs him in the back.
This gives Uffizi time to recover and he bites Dracula.
He then offers him forgiveness and then cuts his head off, which I'm guessing is something Van Helsing never tried.
I spent my whole life searching for a way to kill him. He is, quite simply, beyond the reach of death.
This doesn't turn all the vampires back into humans, however, and Elizabeth asks Luke to kill her as she can't bear being a vampire.
Of course, in the other room, Julia is asking Uffizi to bite her so that she won't die.
Please, don't let me die.
Luke manages to go through with it, giving Elizabeth peace.
Meanwhile, Uffizi stays behind with Julia, now king of the vampires.
And so the movie ends. And in conclusion, I have to say I really like this third movie. The heroes are competent and likeable. They're very good on screen, they have good characters. Luke is noble and displays his conscience, showing that he's actually willing to save people even though he doesn't truly understand the danger he's in. It also shows the torture and struggle they go through, Luke having to actually kill a child at one point, and the constant threat of Uffizi turning into a vampire throughout the entire movie. Having a hero with a bladed whip and a sickle, taking on clown vampires on stilts, it comes across as the closest and best attempt at making a Castlevania or Devil May Cry movie that we'll ever see. The ending is also really nice. Well, not in a positive sense, it's a bad ending. But because of that, it leaves it on a good moment. You've got two heroes going different ways, one of which becoming a complete monster while the other person losing the one he loves and having to walk off to nowhere. It also leaves it hanging in that all the vampires are still around. You've got a new vampire king, Dracula's dead, but the one replacing him is much more effective. All in all, I think this is the best in the trilogy, and I can ignore all the continuity errors because of it.
Don't fail me now.
Having sat through all three of these films now, it becomes really apparent how flawed the continuity is. Especially when you look at, in the first film, they explain all the vampires are dead, except for Dracula. Although Uffizi got bitten by those vampires 2 months before Dracula died. They then, in the third film, throw away entirely the idea that he was Judas, and by then it's too late to try and fix things. We've already seen the others. You've established that, you should at least stick with it while you've got it. And then of course, all of a sudden, it's Rutger Hauer, because we needed to have 3 different actors as Dracula in the 3 different films. And of course, he's got an American accent as well, but if you're not going to bother with the continuity at this point, I don't see why I should care.
Tell me something. What does it mean? DG.
Damaged goods. It was either that or Buffy.
And I'll crash it down, and you break your crown, and you put your